is more challenging than China's rise to the current international order, because China's policy tries to maintain the order. The reason is very obvious. China benefits from the present order, and meanwhile, the Trump administration believes and China benefits more from the current order than the United States. That's why they want to change the order, and based on the ideology of anti-establishmentism. So from my side, if we talk about what the ideology and challenging the current international order or the liberalist order is anti-establishmentism in the US and the populism in the Europe. I think in economic terms, it's already shaping up to be the Chinese century. By 2014, according to the IMF, China was the world's largest economy by purchasing power parity, and in other respects, China is already the world's largest manufacturer, the world's largest exporter, the world's largest market for a great many important commodities such as vehicles. The question is whether that economic power translates into political power and strategic power, because I think most people would agree, probably even based in Beijing, that America remains the world's dominant political power. And the question is, will that economic mismatch between economic power and strategic power change, and China will become the dominant power, not just economically, but politically? It's too soon to tell that, however, on that, because there are a lot of different variables. Will there be a direct conflict between China and the US, for example, over dominance of the Pacific? Will China perhaps be constrained by other things? Maybe there'll be internal disruption to China's politics if it cannot manage to, for example, maintain the current political stability. That could disrupt China's political rise. And finally, there's the question of the rest of the world, because between them, China and the US are not the whole world economy. Other major powers will have a say in this. And at the moment, it looks like most of the other major powers in the world, Japan, the European Union, are closer to the United States than to China. So there's a question whether China, even as the world's largest economy, can become the dominant political power without allies.
I think economic growth, the success or failure of it will be determined by the degree to which individual countries and regions can supply jobs for the great emerging middle classes of these countries, formerly poor countries. I think what we're likely to see in the 21st century is many people who are either liberated from hard labor or for whom there is too little hard labor to provide jobs. And what will these people do? How will they be employed? And I think that will be a major factor contributing forward. Also, even though the world population is declining, we're still in an era of massive male youth bulges in about 20 or 30 countries. And there's going to be a lot of pressure to provide jobs for people, whether it's in China, in Yemen, in Ethiopia, or wherever.
The main question of my talk is if robotics and artificial intelligence and the upcoming industrial revolution are a threat or an opportunity for the world and for manufacturing countries and also for developing countries. And the answer is still unknown, but what is sure now is that we have to invest in the main assets that are characterizing the industrial revolution, the digital transformation, competences, infrastructures, data centers, and all the tools that are fundamental and are considered enabling technologies for the future digital transformation. I also presented the differences between the US, Europe and China, how they are integrating artificial intelligence into different knowledge and competences and scientific results. For example, in the US, they are investing very much in developing artificial intelligence for humanities, while in China, they are investing in developing artificial intelligence for agriculture application, for producing food, for example. So globalization has obtained some results in terms of being socially connected, but in terms of geopolitics, we still see many differences also in how the digital transformation is implemented in the society. Then I spoke about robotics and how the journey of robotics is coming into us, because robotics was developed for manufacturing countries, for industrial production, and robots are in manufacturing plants. But in recent years, what we have seen is the development of service robotics, which is intended to support services and the offer of services in terms of medical robotics, social robotics, educational robotics. And now what is happening is that robotics is coming into our houses by producing some consumer products and also producing changes in the society in terms of supporting autonomous drive or different products that are revolutionizing business and revolutionizing our life.
Very serious problem that people leave behind. The global agenda talks about eradicating poverty, eradicating hunger, having every child in primary and secondary education. We're off track to achieve these things. And that means not just a few people left behind, it means literally hundreds of millions of people missing out. Take education, more than 250 million children, adolescents and youth not in school as we speak. How can those children and youth of the future really contribute to a knowledge economy denied the most basic access to education? So it is time for the international community to get a grip on the reality of what is happening. If we want a world that is well fed, where people don't live in extreme poverty, where education is a right, not a privilege, we have a lot to do. International development assistance is important, critical for the lowest income countries, for other countries to be prioritising their budget so that their growth is inclusive and sustainable is critical. There are solutions. What's needed is the political will to activate and implement those solutions.
There are more than 70 million people in the world that are forcibly displaced from their homes, either as refugees crossing borders or displaced in their own country because of war, violence, discrimination, persecution, bad governance. Why is that? The world has become a difficult place where to make peace. We have become unable to make peace and to build peace. So that's the first thing that we need to look at if we want to reduce this global refugee crisis. Meanwhile, what is very important to remember is that 85% of those 70 million people are not in the rich world. They are in poor countries or middle-income countries. So the effort, and the new effort, not just humanitarian, but medium, long-term effort, founded on sound development, both for refugees and for host communities, has to focus on those countries. We have now a global compact on refugees. We will have the first ever global refugee forum in December this year in Geneva. This is these are opportunity to rally broader coalitions of actors, not just states and the United Nations, but also the private sector, the business community, civil society, academia, to forge new ways to respond to the global refugee crisis and to finally address strategically its root causes.
The question that you're raising, will Syria find a long-lasting peace? Well, the Syrian people deserve a long-lasting peace. Think about it. They've been 8 years now in a horrible conflict which became from local, regional, and frankly international. So the answer is it must be yes. Now, how to do it is where the challenge is coming. And the only way to do it is actually to end the military conflict, because there is no solution. It's not just a word, it's the truth. There will never be just a military solution. And include everyone. New constitution, elections under the UN supervision. That would be a way to include it.
Well, I'm delighted to be able tonight to address the members of the trilaterals and their guests, and I think my focus will be tonight on three things. One is, multilateralism has been the bread and butter of many of us, certainly at the IMF, and we believe that it has been critical in order to address many of the potential disorders of the world. Multilateralism is under threat at the moment, and I think that we have to make every effort to rejuvenate it, adapt it, and make sure that it continues to help govern, particularly the economic developments around the world. That's message number one. My second message will have to do with the much more longer-term consequences of short-term policies and mechanisms, and that is really the consequences of climate change. I believe that many of the issues that we're debating at the moment will mean absolutely nothing in 20 years' time if we have not acted now in order to make sure that the planet remains something that is hospitable for our children and grandchildren. And my third message, which will not surprise any of those who know me or my friends, will have to do with inequality, and in particular the inequality that women have to suffer and have had to suffer for a long time. And while inequality as such is a major disruption, I believe that by addressing women's situation and the inequality that they face, it will help quite a way in reducing inequalities. So we'll try to do that tonight.